Welcome to the Even Better podcast, where your host, Sinikka Waugh of Your Clear Next Step, brings you exciting content about making communities better by helping people get even better at work.
Well, thank you everyone for joining us today. What a joy. I am here today with Lynn Reed. I've known her for several years. We've worked side by side on a handful of things. She is a project manager with experience in a variety of industries, including higher education, government, administration, insurance, financial services, meeting management, training, and information technology. You name it, Lynn's been involved. She has been a board member of Project Management Institute Central Iowa chapter for the last 4 years and has just been elected as the president-elect for 2020. Congratulations, Lynn. That is so wonderful.
Thank you. Thank you.
Lynn is always looking for more educational opportunities and ways to meet new people. And one of the things that I personally delight in about Lynn is when faced with a project, a new challenge, something innovative, something different, something out of the ordinary, many people that I have encountered will sort of sag their shoulders and go, I wonder if we can. And Lynn lights up and says, hey, let's do it. So it is super fun to work with you, Lynn. It has always been a joy.
Oh, thank you. I've always enjoyed working with you as well, Sinikka.
Thanks, Lynn. So I'm excited about this topic. As we go through the Even Better podcast, we've been careful to keep a wide variety of topics, and we've engaged topics for business analysts and for project managers and for developers and for people who go to work every day, regardless of what field they're in. And today is one of our focused topics for business analysts and also project managers. I think in the long run, these are some tips that will help PMs help their business analysts work even better. So today's topic are highlights of the top 5 things project managers wish that business analysts knew. So we're going to start abbreviating BAs and PMs, and we know that we're talking about project managers and business analysts. But Lynn, I love the ideas you've put together here. I can't wait to hear your insights on these. So let's dive right in. The first one is don't assume, discover. What are you talking about here, Lynn?
Yeah, it was funny. When we first started talking about this topic, right afterwards, I was able to go to the Leadership Institute meeting that PMI hosts for chapter leaders. It's right before Global Congress. So I got an opportunity to talk to so many PMs there and ask them this question. And so many responses started with, don't assume, and then they would fill in extra stuff. So I kind of merged it all down into the statement of don't assume, discover. Don't assume that the other person's an expert. We may be as new as you are in this space. Don't assume that the other person's a bully just because they have the title of PM and in your business, in your company that you work for, that's how projects run. Don't assume that the other person is focused on one thing. And this goes, I think, for BAs as well as PMs. Many people assume that the project manager is only interested in the financial dollars that it's going to cost or coming in on time, and that's it. And sometimes PMs assume that BAs care only about requirements, and that's the only thing. And that's not necessarily true. We all know that with different projects, there's different requirements, there's different impacts on the company or the people that are working on the project. So even though you have just that one task of collect requirements or lead the testing, as PMs, we have an idea as to what you're going to be working on, but there's more to it than just that. It's how it's a part of the project and how it's going to work and who you're going to be working with. So there's a lot of information to intake, and don't assume that you know it all. Go ahead and ask. If you don't know, ask. If you think you know, but you're not quite sure, ask. There's no harm in asking. So that sums a lot of that up altogether.
You bet. That last point that you just made about even if you think you know, ask. I think one of the lines that I use in my training a lot is you have assumptions, that's fine, but don't keep them to yourself. Assume out loud so that we really can move forward with that idea of discovery.
There's assuming that everybody knows the same thing or everybody's on the same page. One of my favorite stories for this is I was in the middle of a project and I had the project team all together and we were talking. There's about 20 people in the room and we were talking about a portal. And I knew that there were a couple people I really needed to acknowledge that we weren't all talking about the same thing. So I started the conversation and went around the room and said, this is going to sound silly, but I want you to tell us exactly what you're talking about when we say portal. And we went around the room, and out of 20 people, we had about 15 different examples of what a portal is. And those two people finally, it was great. I watched the light bulb pop on over their heads, and they're like, oh, that's what you're talking about. Oh, yeah, no, from my viewpoint, we can't do it that way. And because we had that conversation right then, we were able to figure out what the correct path forward was, and we saved weeks of time of spinning wheels and lost effort. So it was a great opportunity, and everybody was assuming that everybody knew what everybody was talking about, and we didn't. We had business people who thought it was one thing, and data warehouse people who thought it was something completely different, and another web designer who thought it was something completely different from that. So there's a lot of don't make assumptions. If you don't know, ask.
Ask. Absolutely. Well, and that example right there is like the poster child for the making of the business glossary or the data dictionary or the glossary of terms for any given project. If we assume that we all know what we mean by the same word, we're already marching down a dangerous path.
Exactly.
That became a topic for me that was painfully obvious when I was working in a organization in agribusiness, and the word plant could refer to the little green thing that sprouts out of the ground, or it could refer to a certain data element in the system, or it could refer to the region in which that little green thing was grown, or it had all of these different meanings, and you really had to get careful about when you said plant, what did you mean?
Exactly. Yep.
You bet. Great stuff.
And that happens a lot of industries and across industries, people working on the same project together. It means something very specific in that particular industry, and they don't think about it meaning something else in other industries. For instance, your word plant. Well, if you're talking to a facilities person, they're thinking in a big building.
You bet. And we expect our business analysts to be versatile, and we expect our project managers to be versatile. But if we're coming into those spaces with our own definition of words and we're not talking out loud, discovering, to your point about, if we come in assuming that we have the definition right, we're really running a risk of confusion for sure.
Yep, absolutely.
You bet. All right, so we're going through these highlights of top 5 things that project managers wish the business analysts knew. The first one is don't assume, discover. And you made some wonderful points about just making sure we're asking the questions and putting the topics on the table. So how about this second one? Take time to understand the other person's place on the team. What do you mean by that?
There's a couple of different aspects to this. It's not just saying, oh, hey, this person's the PM, this person's the BA. It's more of what are they doing on this project? Because as a PM, I've come in and I've just managed a work breakdown structure, just managed the schedule, and I didn't have anything to do with the finances. There's been projects where the finances was the most important part, and all I had to do is usher that project across the finish line. I didn't have to arrange any testing because that was all done prior to my getting there. And the same goes, the PMs realize that can happen with BAs as well, that we realize that BAs sometimes get pulled off projects or thrown into a project midstream or towards the end and maybe scrambling to catch up. Sometimes you get a BA assigned, like for instance, I worked with a fabulous BA at my last position. She's amazing. And on one project, I had her, all she did was write requirements. That was the only thing that she was asked to do, she was assigned to do, and I arranged all of the testing for the project before we went live. But on the next project that started before the first one ended, she wrote all the business requirements, she arranged all of the testing, did all the use cases, wrangled people, and for that project, when I couldn't be there, she was my backup. I didn't turn to another PM, I turned to her. And yes, part of that was her personally, but it was important for me to keep those two projects separate and to lean on her for only the things that she had been assigned to do for that project, because everybody's time was so tight that I couldn't ask her to do anything extra at that point. And so I think it's important to understand what their position's supposed to be, what they're in charge of, what they're doing. And as I said earlier, that applies in both directions. Hey, BAs, take a moment to, I'm not talking about in-depth discovery and having a 35-page thesis on what your project manager is doing, but just a general idea as to what that particular person's in charge of. Maybe they're really only there to usher it across the finish line, or maybe they're going to sit down with everybody and completely revamp the entire schedule. And that's important. During this time, you also get to learn a little bit more about that person. So you're working not just with a position, but with a person as well. So utilize that time to learn about that person. And that's things like how they like to communicate. Do they like dad jokes? Do they like to talk about knitting? You know, the little personal things that you can pepper into conversations that just make interactions go a little bit more smoothly. Some people like really brief communications, and this is a great opportunity to figure that out. And as I was pulling this particular topic together, one thing that kept occurring, not just in my conversations, but to me as I was writing this out, was that this is also a great opportunity. This is what I call my colliery, is that what's important to you may not be what's important to me. And this is an excellent time to figure that out. And what's important to me may not be what's important to you. And it goes both directions. And I point that out because a lot of people, and not just necessarily BAs and PMs, but people outside of our two divisions, think that we get so myopic. We get so super focused on what we're doing that we don't see the whole picture. And PMs, we need to. We kind of have to see the whole picture. And sometimes we get caught up in that and go, oh, well, BA, oh, you just care about requirements only, or you just care about testing only. And that's not necessarily true. So this is a great opportunity for communication and reminding people, hey, no, there's more to it than just what we're talking about here. Don't forget that. Or, hey, there's been a change to the entire picture. This is what's happening, so that everybody ultimately can stay on the same page for a project.
I think one of the examples that you shared early on is another powerful example. When we understand someone's role on that project, we also need to understand what else they're working on. Because to your point about that particular BA that you were working with, that you knew you had to be protective of her time, that maybe her time was very limited for project A and that you had more available to you for project B. It's so important for us as project managers to kind of look around and go, well, where does this thing that I'm having this business analyst or that they've been assigned to do, or any team member, how does this thing fit into the context of the rest of the stuff they're working on? Because when the rest of the stuff piles up, or if I need them to backfill for something, or what is their availability, if I don't have the time to understand that, if I haven't met them and connected with them as a human, I don't know that. And then we're going to wind up upside down at some point.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that goes for smaller organizations as well as larger organizations. I moved from a smaller company to a very, very large corporate company. And the structure is different, but having an understanding of when I can ask for extra time, or when I need extra time, or what other things that this person might be involved with can help my project and can help me schedule out my project. So that goes in the other direction, the BA reaching out to the PM and understanding that they're not dedicated to just one project, or that there are optimum times during the course of the project to hit them with something or share something that might be important, maybe not, you don't know. But great times to communicate up with them is good for a BA to keep in mind as they're participating in a project.
You bet. That ties beautifully. That brings us right to your third point there. So again, we're looking at the top 5 things project managers wish their BAs knew, or at least demonstrated that they know more consistently, perhaps. And our third one is, or your third one is, communication is important. And you've added the tagline, we all know this, right? So let's talk about how you see communication playing out.
The reason why it came up in the conversations was somebody had this fabulous statement. Basically, they said, communicate, communicate, communicate. And the reason why we were talking about it is we were talking about experienced team members versus inexperienced team members. And that your experienced team members probably are going to identify problems sooner in a project. They know their tools, they know how it works at the company. They're going to see a warning flag a lot sooner than an inexperienced BA is. And inexperience could mean several things. It could mean that they haven't worked with that line of business before, they haven't worked with that team before, they haven't worked in that company before, they're squeaky new from college. So there's a lot of things that lead into being experienced and inexperienced. And one of the great ways to get around that, to deal with that, to integrate that into any solution that you have to come up with is communicate. As a PM, I can't fix something I don't know is broken.
Absolutely.
And the sooner, BA, that you say, hey, this doesn't look right. Hey, I don't see where this is going. Hey, let's talk this through just so that I'm super clear or we're all super clear. The sooner that you can do that, great. And reach out directly to the PM. Have a private conversation that's not in the middle of a team conversation or a big Zoom meeting, or you can contact them individually and say, hey, this is why I think this is important. That give your PM as much information as you can so that they can make a decision, or they can communicate, pull in the people that need to be in the decision into a room to talk it through before it becomes on fire.
Right.
And the other side of that, the other side of the coin for that is, hey, PMs, tell your BA stuff. Share with them. This is actually, for many of your team members as well. Make sure they know when something's been brought up, when there's a decision that needs to be made, that they have all the information that they need to have. We're facilitators. We help them get the tools that they need to solve problems and make decisions and make the project successful. So communication is so very important, and it just can never be stressed enough. Hey, talk to each other, especially if you're going to ask your BA to be your backup. They need to know at least enough to cover that meeting for that hour or that half hour that they're covering. They need to know as much as you can share with them, as much as they can absorb, so that they can make sure that the time is effective.
Absolutely. You said two things that sparked additional conversation. One of them was, I don't know if you caught this message at this year's PMI Central Iowa Chapter PDD, but the keynote presenter over lunchtime had this delightful statement that just struck me, and I have not forgotten it since that moment. It's the first time I've heard him articulate it this way. Communication is the deliverable until you have the deliverable. And that turn of phrase, I'm sure it was John Stenbeck who said it, but the communication is the deliverable until you have the deliverable is such a powerful reminder to us that if I'm working on things, don't assume that others understand that I'm working on them. If I'm a project manager and you've brought me an idea as a business analyst, you've brought me a risk that I've needed to escalate or an issue that I've needed to help work on, I don't keep you in silence. My job is to communicate to you until the whole thing is resolved, because communication is the deliverable until we have the deliverable.
That is a fabulous way to think of that. Absolutely.
The other thing that's true here is, to your point about keeping the team informed. So both the business analysts communicating to the project managers and project managers communicating to business analysts and any team member, frankly, is the reality that projects don't do themselves. Man, I've been trying since 1996 to get my projects to do themselves, and they don't. It's the people, right? People do projects. And when we treat them like people, not mushrooms, and we don't keep them in the dark, right? We communicate freely. It's so much better.
I also like to think of people not being poinsettia plants. They grow year round, they're green. And when you want them to turn those beautiful red colors, you shove them in a closet and they turn red. So they're pretty and showy, but you can't do that to your team. You can't shove them into a closet so that the project becomes beautiful and finished. That's going to work.
Communicating it's messy business, and people are, we're messy creatures, and we don't do things perfectly every time, but we're human and we try and get through it, which I think is actually going to lead us into your next point. I'm fascinated about your perspective here on this one, that some things can't change is your fourth point about top 5 things project managers wish their business analysts knew, that some things can't change. What do you have in mind there, Lynn?
That is my political statement. Bring us your issues. Bring us the problems. Let us help you solve them. Let us help the team solve them. But also, please understand, there may be times where we look at you and go, yep, I agree. we're totally on the same page, and there is absolutely nothing that we can do about it. Because as PMs, we answer up to the project sponsor, we answer to executive leadership, we answer to end users, we answer to a whole bunch of people, not just the team, not just a small subset of individuals. And there are times where, even though we all look at it and go, yep, there's a better way to do this. Yep, there's a more efficient way to do this. We know that we can't change the time frame, or we can't change resources, or that's going to cost us money to do it. So sometimes the best thing that we can do is document the heck out of it and say, hey, here's a day 2 project. Mm-hmm. Hey, here's something we need to consider in the future. And as PMs, we can take that information and circulate that out with portfolio managers, with other sponsors, with executive leadership, that there's something that we can change in the future. But it's not that we're trying to ignore anyone. It's not that we're discounting anyone. It's that there are times where there's things that simply just cannot change.
I love the way that you've positioned this for business analysts to just be aware that sometimes we can't fix it, we can't change it. And I think there's also that message to project managers, right? That when you're aware of those things that can't change, that doesn't mean you put up barricades. It doesn't mean you say, no, we've tried that already. But somehow we have to respectfully say, thank you. Thank you for raising the idea. Thank you for speaking up. Thank you for pointing it out. Thank you for your insights on this. And here's what I can do. And here's where my limitations are, right? Here's what we're rubbing up against. Here's what I can do. I will take this and I will, escalate it and consider it as day 2 projects or phase 2 or, tomorrow, those great ideas that are out of scope on the current situation. I'm not just going to close you down. It's up to me as a project manager to welcome you, to say thank you for that information, especially if I know for sure that that you're brave enough to bring it up in the first place, but that between the two of us, we can't change everything.
Exactly.
You bet. Let's get to point number 5 here. We're talking about 5 things that project managers wish business analysts knew. And I'm very curious about this last one. Project managers wish that senior level would know that PMs and BAs are not the same thing. Wait, say more.
Right? When it comes up so often, and I have a whole bunch of friends who are BAs. I went down to St. Louis Business Analyst Development Day. This was something that came up in the conversations with all of the BAs down there at the conference and with project managers at PMI's Global. And outside of us PMs and BAs, there's 2 perceptions that both of them I found kind of disturbing. One was that, PMs, BAs, they're interchangeable. It's fine if you don't have a BA. And there's a lot of PMs that are going, no, I need that resource. And there's a lot of BAs I know that get approached to say, it's just a schedule, just run a couple of meetings. It's like being a PM. You already know how to do it. It's the same skill set. It's fine. And it's like, no, we're not interchangeable. I think part of that comes from that we have a lot of the same skill set, that there's a lot of that organizing skills and that interpersonal skills that PMs and BAs have that let senior leadership, who are always trying to find ways of doing more with less.
Right.
They like to think, it's fine, they'll just pick up a few more duties and it's no big deal. But it is. And in some projects, it can kill the project if you don't have resources allocated correctly. And hey, BAs, we know this. PMs, we see this. Not all of us think that we're interchangeable.
No.
And there's a lot of PMs and BAs out there that say, I don't want to do the other thing. I'm happy being what I am, and I don't want to learn all the extra things I need to learn to do that other job. I want those people to come in and help me and be partners with me. I thought that was so important to bring that up, that, hey, BAs, we do see this. We do understand this. There's not always the ability to change it or fix it, but we do see it. The other thing with this is that senior leadership often rates BAs lower than PMs, at least from my viewpoint. And if I'm wrong, I'm happy for anybody to tell me this, that my perception is incorrect. I don't think it's true. I don't think that BAs are less than PMs on the scale of team members and value to a project. I think they are equal. I think that there's a fabulous partnership there, and I would love to see more partnership between organizations and in companies with PMs and BAs working together towards a common goal of a successful project. So, hey, BAs, PMs do see this, and we try to change that perception.
You bet. That's beautifully put. I think we've evolved as a discipline, and I think the project management discipline has been around longer, right? PMI is celebrating 50 years in 2019, and the BA discipline has been around for less time, right? Has emerged later. And I think that contributed to someone who's been around more established must be better than someone who's less established. And I think there was some unfortunate period of time especially in the IT space, where if you didn't have another role to call a person and they were facilitating meetings and they were able to interact with both the developers and the customers, we'll just call them a BA. We don't know what else to call them, so we'll just call them a BA. And I am just delighting in how the industry has emerged and how we've grown as a discipline and how project managers and business analysts really have become to appreciate each other. Even the Project Management Institute has a certification for business analysis, knowing that business analysis is different from project management. They are different skills. To your point about what do we share in common? Well, we both have the ability to facilitate conversations, right? To be that neutral, unbiased facilitator who is topic neutral, but people positive. We can move us forward. And we both have the ability to keep things organized. And we both talk about scope. Right? We talk about scope in kind of different ways. What are the requirements? Is the specific, and how do you need these requirements to play out is a more BA kind of way of looking at it. And a project manager might be, what is our scope and how much time do we have to pull that off, or how many dollars are available? So we might be looking at scope in a broader sense, but we're both talking about scope. So I can see how people would confuse us. But even as project managers and business analysts, we're each unique, right? I couldn't count how many project managers I know, and they're all different. And how many business analysts do I know, and they're all different. And I do both skills, and that doesn't make me a split personality, I don't think, maybe. But doing both, I know that I leverage different parts of my strengths. I use different sets of skills for both. And I think it is so inspiring for business analysts when they know that their project manager doesn't think they're trying to grow up to be a PM, like a BA is just on the path to project managementhood. But business analysis is its own discipline in its own right.
Yep, absolutely. Absolutely. And has a lot to contribute to a project.
Absolutely. And to the greatness, I've often talked about the two sides of the coin. So if project management is the process by which we get work done, and it's a very effective process. If project management is the process by which we get work done in the business, business analysis is the art of making sure we're doing the right business in the first place, right? We're doing the right work. And so I love looking at both sides of that coin.
Yep, absolutely.
So Lynn, you took us through top 5 things PMs wish their BAs knew. I love your insights here. Not assuming, let's discover, taking time to understand the other person's place and their role, focusing in on the importance of communication and the truth, unfortunately, that some things simply can't change. And really that bit of encouragement to business analysts, knowing that we as project managers, we know we're not the same, we're different, and we have this really critical relationship where we can help each other. So a question that I like to close our podcast with is, what's making you even better where you are today, Lynn?
Oh, yeah. When I read that question, I heard that question, and I just, my brain kind of like, and it took a lot of time to think about it because there's so many different answers I can give for my life right now. But I boiled it down to one item, and that is self-care.
Lovely.
That it is important. I'd like to be a Wonder Woman. I like to be the leader. I like to be the person that people come to and go, oh, okay, that's awesome. Thank you so much. But there's got to be time for myself. And taking that time allows me to rest and allows me to come back re-energized. It allows me to find excitement in all the things that I'm doing. And that's so very important. And I think that excitement leaks out onto others around me and makes them excited about what we're doing, so that everybody looks forward to coming in and talking, not just talking to me, but talking to each other and doing the work and finishing the work and being proud of what we got done. So taking that moment to take a step back and going, no, this is going to be a 50-hour week only, or no, I'm going to aim for 40 hours and nothing more, so that I can go home and spend time with my family and doing the things that I love to do. That's not directing people or tasks. That's so very, very important. So anybody who's listening to this who needs to hear this, yes, schedule that time to go home and play with the dog, or get the massage, or sit in the library, or sit at the coffee shop and just watch people walk by, or take that 5 minutes or 2 minutes even just to sit in your car before you walk into the office during the day, and you just sit there and you just exist, just relax and breathe and realize that you are awesome and amazing and you're going to do good work. Even if you don't feel like it right now, you are going to do good work and go out and be awesome.
Thank you, Lynn. That is just really, really wonderful. I appreciate you so much. Thank you for your time today. And to our listeners, thank you so much for listening. This has been Lynn Reed, a conversation with a very experienced and wonderful project manager who continues to lift up others and inspire around her. Lynn, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Sinikka.
Thank you for tuning in today. The Even Better podcast will be back with more content soon. But in the meantime, subscribe to our podcast or check out our website at yourclearnextstep.com for more information. See you next episode.